All right, so superiority is another kind of fictional device, and I use this example of a Nissan Rogue commercial, a TV commercial. This is just a still, and this is at the end. So the story in this is that these handsome European-looking couple are driving around in this Nissan Rogue in a kind of a historic center of some European city, and they're dodging these bulls, you know, at every turn. And at the end, they get out of the car and they're going into the steakhouse. And this bull's standing and, you know, looking at him like, you know, do you want to challenge me? And he just gives him a look, and then the cow cowers away and walks away, and they walk into the steakhouse. And what's really important here, and Nissan and all these companies really understand this, is that consumption is the ultimate act of conquest over other animals. Once we eat them, we've completely annihilated anything that matters about them. Okay. Necessity, I'm sure you're all familiar with so many people that tell you that they need to consume certain animal products. And so, well, if we look at the history, this all stems from a propaganda campaign from the USDA and the dairy industry after World War II, when the dairy industry and animal agriculture in general was hurting. So the USDA said, hey, let's launch these campaigns to make people think they really need cow's milk. And so here's an example of one of the posters. The interesting thing is that even today, a recent study showed that 66% of Americans still believe eating animals is necessary for survival. Like, we're carnivores, basically. This is a still from the movie Rebel Without a Cause. You'd have to be a little bit older if you know, to remember this film, or unless you're like a film student or something like that. But it was kind of a seminal New Age film. And so here you have a chicken run game. They want him to do this chicken run where you race the car off the cliff. And the person who jumps out the first is the loser, and the person who jumps out second is the winner. Well, someone ended up dying in this one. But the point of this is that most people would never walk away from this film thinking that this film is all about what chickens mean in our culture. And basically, being a chicken is a coward. And there's even a Merriam-Webster definition of chicken, which is a person who is afraid. So we have used animal names to denigrate animals and also animalize certain human groups that we consider inferior. Okay, so wasting. This is a New York Times feature story about a woman who has a butcher shop in Portland, Oregon. And she has a class with these students to teach them all about what it's like to butcher a pig, and then learn about all of the other body parts. Now, when I talk about wasting as a fictional device, I'm not talking about wasting in general, because obviously the Western world wastes a tremendous amount of food, and it's a terrible problem. But what I'm talking about is the idea that if we eat all of the animal's body parts, that somehow absolves us of any wrongdoing, that actually it just becomes ethical. And so that's what this kind of fiction communicates. And look at whoever styled this photograph did a phenomenal job, because if you look at it closely, you'll start seeing Norman Rockwell themes in it, and it actually resembles the famous Norman Rockwell Thanksgiving dinner painting. Okay, so history and tradition and evolution and heritage, these are all important ways that we justify continuing to consume animals in an age that we really don't need to. And the example I have here is in the Smithsonian, a feature story called How the Chicken Conquered the World. That's really interesting, isn't it? To present the victim, the chicken victim, of which there are over 50 billion slaughtered at 6 weeks old every year in this world, to present that victim as as the conqueror, dressed in a monarch's robe, and to to flip the truth, basically, on its head, in the name of history and tradition. And this is Smithsonian, not that it has any integrity now, but it was once, it's still seen as kind of like, this is an accurate depiction of history. This institution is about history and presenting it accurately, but not in this case. All right, so I'm using this trade ad as an example of how misogyny is communicated and used as a fiction. So here you have a cow, a female dairy milking cow, licking her lips in the fire engine. You can read into that whatever sexual overtones you want, but the main thing I want to draw your attention to is the actual headline of the ad, which reads, "If she can't stay pregnant, what else will she do?" So here to consider the context here, this is the dairy industry is a male-dominated industry that exerts total control over the female bodies here, over her reproduction, her ovaries, her mammary glands, her offspring, and ultimately her life. So you have lots of this in animal. This is an ad for a drug from a pharmaceutical company. And on the other side of that is masculinity and the different kinds of ways we portray masculinity and relate it to eating animals. So this is the iconic scene in Rocky, the movie, where he's in the slaughterhouse and he's punching a dead animal, a hanging animal corpse, using it as a punching bag. And so in this sense, eating animals feeds our ego. It makes us feel more powerful, more confident, more in control, and it also is associated with being a champion, because Rocky ultimately becomes, a big champion. Let's do on this one for a minute. This is actually an ad for a poultry seasoning. And you can't mention sexualization and how we make products more consumable by sexualizing animals without mentioning Carol Adams, the author, who also wrote the the foreword for my new book. And she's the author of The Sexual Politics of Meat, which was written like in the 80s, and it's been updated 20 times since. She's an amazing, her work is amazing, and so I just want to mention her in this context. So we sexualize animal products to make them look more consumable. Look more closely and you'll find many examples of those. You'll find turkey hookers and all kinds of crazy stuff out there. This is a photo I took in front of a new restaurant in the Chicago neighborhood I live in called Andersonville. And it was a good example for me of trivialization, because if we can laugh at them, then, if we can turn animals into a laughing stock, then we don't really need to take anything, we don't have to really think very seriously about the suffering we might be causing them. And that's what this fictional device does well. And this is an example of an ad from the Whole Foods Market We Are Earthlings campaign, which came out a few years back. And it's interesting how this glorifies the farmer. It turns him into kind of a, good shepherd, really. And so there's the biblical Jesus type of connection there. But this just doesn't exist today. We don't get animal products from farmers and, settings like this. So that's why it's a fiction. And then reductionism. Reductionism is a ploy. It's a marketing ploy that distracts our attention on one specific thing, like cage-free, free-range, organic, and then to the exclusion of everything else that is problematic with using animals for food. So in the case of the egg-laying, hens bred for egg-laying, I don't like to use the word egg-laying hen because it defines them as egg machines, but those that are bred for